Directly from the files of whatever Leon wants, Leon gets, Donald Trump has sparked outrage and shock as he breaks his own executive order, the one he signed on day one, to do Elon Musk's bidding. Now, the tone-deaf but hardly colorblind decision to let white foreigners from South Africa in while kicking brown foreigners from pretty much everywhere else out, well, as you'll see in our featured clip with Stephen Miller, rectifying that reality, well, it's a study in hypocrisy and double standards.
When it comes to immigration enforcement, now that we have achieved the mission of sealing the border, you're going to see more and more resources and priorities put into the mass deportation program. And so on a day-to-day basis, you're going to see exponentially larger numbers of illegal aliens being arrested and removed from the interior.
Hey, you heard that here first, folks. More deportations of dark-skinned immigrants. That's going to be ramping up. And it turns out, well, it seems that maybe we're going to need the space because while jackboots are kicking out immigrants of color right out of the country, as you are about to see, it seems white arms are flung wide open for Elon Musk's pasty countrymen, the white ones, the ones who created apartheid. And now, in a democratic South Africa, well, they're feeling the painful pinch, the loss of their previous positions of privilege, and you know what they're calling it? A genocide against white farmers, if you can imagine that. Now, as NBC reports, it's important to remember, Trump signed an order on January 20th that said the U.S. lacks the ability to absorb large numbers of migrants, and in particular refugees, into its communities in a manner that does not compromise the availability of resources for Americans, that protects their safety and security, and that ensures the appropriate assimilation of refugees. Executive order. The buck stops here. Of course, unless Elon says otherwise, because a group of white South Africans will be arriving in Washington, D.C. on Monday by way of a State Department chartered plane to be resettled right here in the U.S. as refugees. Well, that's what a source familiar with their arrival told NBC News. Now, it seems pretty black and white to me, but I'm just kind of a TV producer stooge. Let's see what has really led up to this unsettling story about your incoming new white neighbors. As reported, a great report by German public television on the other side of this clip, we're going to move down the double standard food chain of cruelty and pay off our report with Stephen Miller's incredible explanation of the white and wrong standards of an immigration policy, it seems, without rules or measure. But first, here's a great rundown of the reality of these poor white South Africans on their way to our welcoming shores.
Relations between the two countries have been deteriorating since U.S. President Donald Trump returned to the White House with his powerful South African-born advisor, Elon Musk. In February, Trump accused South Africa of confiscating land, echoing comments that Musk has made about alleged racial discrimination in his homeland. Earlier this year, hundreds of white South Africans rallied outside the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria to show their support for Trump and his decision to cut aid to South Africa's government. Professor, it's good to have you with us this evening. The white South Africans who are applying for asylum in the United States, what are they basing their claims on?
They're basing their claims essentially on a fiction that white South Africans are being targeted, that white South Africans are disadvantaged by the new dispensation, and that they have a direct fear that they're being targeted in one way or another. Of course, their privileges of the past have been diminished somewhat, but by no means are they disadvantaged by South African standards. And so what we're seeing is, in fact, a claim based almost entirely on a fiction and on random incidents.
What about the claims by U.S. President Trump and Elon Musk that white South African farmers are victims of racial discrimination?
White South African farmers have struggled in the last 20 years, not because of racial discrimination, but because they have lost many of the subsidies that propped up white farmers during the apartheid era. I think what we need to understand is that Trump's claims have very little to do with South Africa and are about his domestic campaign to show that there is global assault on whiteness, white privilege, that there is a global assault on white Christian men particularly, and this is a way of signaling that message back to his constituencies at home.
Okay, here's our featured clip. Let's watch Stephen Miller incite more trust in the American public with his sincerity and even-handed execution of these heinous and completely arbitrary immigration policies.
Well, because what's happening in South Africa fits the textbook definition of why the refugee program was created. This is persecution based on a protected characteristic, in this case race. So this is race-based persecution. And so this is an example of the president returning the refugee program to what it was intended to be used as. It's state policy. There's land expropriation. There's a whole series of government laws and policies that specifically target white farmers and the white population in South Africa. Well, we just have the first flight is scheduled, I believe, for early next week. But that's just the beginning of what's going to be a much larger scale relocation effort. And so those numbers are going to increase, obviously, as time goes on. It takes a little while to set up the systems and processes and procedures to begin a new refugee flow. But we expect that the pace will increase. It'll increase at a healthy pace as time goes on.
Creating systems, that almost sounds like due process. You know, he's mostly in profile in that clip, but I think it's safe to say that Stephen Miller speaks out of both sides of his mouth and has been doing that for some time.
I will say and I will do things that no one else in their right mind would say or do.
Now, was there not one kid at Samo High that could have cuffed the snark out of this dweeb? I pin it on the damn California live and let live liberals.